Welcome to another episode of Monday Matches. Today we're going to do AMD versus NVIDIA, so let's get started. Like I mentioned, today we are going to take a look at NVIDIA versus AMD to see which is a better investment. If this is your first time watching Monday Matches, every Monday I put two companies against each other to see which one I would prefer to invest the most. Just because one is going to be the winner does not mean that the other is a bad investment. Both of these companies can actually be very, very good investments, but to me, I'm just trying to find the best one. And if you're wondering how I'm going to determine that, I have a few criteria here. This is my point system where I break down where I'm going to give a point. So we're going to take a look at market cap growth, revenue breakdown, revenue growth, margins growth, cash flow margins, the overall business, the balance sheet, valuation based on forward PE and forward price to sales ratio. And at the end of the day, this is my opinion, so I am going to give points based on my thoughts. If you guys don't know, I am also an electrical engineer, so semiconductor companies are my bread and butter. So these two companies I know like the back of my hand. I really enjoy both of these. Both of these are companies I owned in my portfolio. And if you guys ever want to find my portfolio, I have all the information in the links below. Like always, guys, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the thumbs up, and the bell. It helps the small channel out so much, and I truly appreciate the support. It means a lot. If you guys ever want to get in contact with me, I'm very active on Twitter, and I am very active in the Discord channel that I have free for any investor that wants to come in. Remember, this is not a show where I do any recommendations. I just talk opinions based on the information that I see. So feel free to check me out on Twitter, on Discord, or again, the YouTube comments is also another great place. I'm active and respond very frequently. Like I said, I do this every Monday. So for next Monday match, let me know on the comments who you want to see. Maybe Square versus PayPal. I have been doing a lot of e-payment stocks right now, so that might be a good one to see. Intel Corporation versus the winner might also be pretty fun. DraftKings versus Spotify. They're just both two heavy growth companies, so maybe, especially both of them have gone up a lot in the past few days, so maybe some people might want to take a look at. And one more thing before I go on, I know there's some people that were really hoping for the Microsoft versus Google. Microsoft versus Google actually came up in second place. NVIDIA versus AMD got 42%. Microsoft versus Google got 38%. But I am going to be on a road trip this Friday, so I am going to be working on the Microsoft versus Google video, and that one's going to do a special episode, you can say, of Monday Matches that's going to come out on Friday. But still, after that, regular Monday Matches continue on Mondays. All right, so let's start up with the first thing, and that's market cap growth. Market cap growth, the way I'm going to take a look at that is just by taking a look at both these companies and how they have grown in market cap throughout the past 5 years. And to be honest, both of these companies have actually show kind of very similar type growth. If we start with AMD in June 26, 5 years ago, compared to now, has gone up 2,100%. That is insane, right? And you can be like, how can NVIDIA beat that? Unfortunately, it can't, but it is actually in almost similar levels. Since 5 years ago, NVIDIA has returned 1,700% to investors. So obviously the first point I'm gonna have to give here is gonna be to AMD, just for that huge market growth. But again, like I'm saying, just because one of them is gonna be the winner does not mean that the other is bad investment. Both of these companies, if you invested 5 years ago, have returned way better than the overall SPY. Let's just take a look at the SPY in the past 5 years. In the past 5 years, the SPY has returned about 50%. So both these companies are doing way better to compare to the overall market. So congratulations to anybody that's been holding for that time. And even in the most recent years, I'm pretty sure both of them have outpaced the market. All right, so now we saw AMD got the first point. Next, we're taking a look at revenue breakdown. And after that, we're going to take a look at revenue growth. All right, so now we're going to take a look at revenue breakdown, and that's exactly what it sounds. So this is not which one makes more revenue, because right now if we take a look at just pure revenue, AMD is a lot smaller than NVIDIA. AMD makes up about $1.8 billion of revenue in the most recent quarter. NVIDIA, on the other hand, did about $3 billion. So it's almost double the size of revenue compared to AMD. What I want to take a look at here is seeing where that revenue is split up between the company, right? You don't want one product to be the main source of a company's revenue, because if that's the case, what if that product starts to do bad? Things can just go in a crash from there on. It could just be bad news. So you want to make sure you invest in a company that's very, very diversified within its materials. At the same time, you don't want them to diversify. You want them to kind of interact with each other. You're not going to want to sell a tire and then also have a coffee shop. You might want to sell tires and then parts of the tire or ways to fix the tire. So you gotta, even though you don't want them to be over diversified, but you still need some diversification. So even though AMD here breaks down their 10Q report in only two types of revenue, they do a computing and graphics, and then they have enterprise, embedded, and semi-custom. This is pretty much the two types of revenue that this company collects. But within this is different types of applications as well. In the computing and graphics, we have graphics card for graphics cards and CPU. In the enterprise, embedded, and semi-customs, we also have CPUs for data centers. We have chips for data centers as well. We have chips for platform gaming. So there's a whole bunch of different aspects where AMD is in. So now let's take a look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA, and they actually break it down a little bit more, and then actually we will be able to see how they correspond with AMD. So in their most recent earnings, they actually broke it down. A huge portion of NVIDIA's revenue comes from gaming. NVIDIA is in gaming with the graphics card. AMD is also in gaming with graphics card and CPUs. Next, we're going to take a look at data centers. NVIDIA is in data centers with their leading graphics card. Again, AMD is also in the data centers with GPUs and their CPUs, so the graphics cards and the CPU. Then the next part is ProViz. So ProViz is pretty much graphics card for workstations. Again, so NVIDIA has that. AMD is also in there. Now we're gonna start seeing where AMD and NVIDIA differ. The first thing we saw is NVIDIA only focuses on GPU, where AMD is also focusing on CPUs. So that's where AMD has the extra advantage, CPUs. NVIDIA, though, is taking more into the auto industry, and within the auto industry is working in artificial intelligence, is working on machine learning. This is something AMD is not really focusing on. They are really, the computing and the chips that they're using can be used for that, but NVIDIA is truly focused in the artificial market. They just recently purchased a company called Mellanox. Mellanox, I believe, is the company they just purchased, which is a leading company in the artificial intelligence world. So you can see NVIDIA is in that sector where AMD is not. The final one is OEM and IP. Both AMD and NVIDIA are in these sectors. So like we said, both of them pretty much are in the same sectors, then they differ in different things. So both of them have a very strong breakdown in revenue, and I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna give it to both AMD and NVIDIA for this point, right? Sometimes I might do that. If I can't really see a true winner, I think the only fair decision would be to give points to both of them. Both of them are pretty much in the similar markets, except they differentiate between just a small part. So I think at the end of the day, both of them have very strong revenue breakdown. All right, so right now AMD has 2 points, NVIDIA has 1 point. Revenue growth is going to be the next thing, and after revenue growth, we're going to take a look at that margin growth. So here we are on this great website, lazyfa.com, which allows me to see all these numbers pretty easily. So first, let's take a look at AMD's past revenue growth. Revenue growth in 2019 was 3.9%. Unfortunately, last year was a very bad time for semiconductors, and most of them actually saw a huge decline in revenue. We're going to see similar results with NVIDIA. In 2018, AMD grew 23%. In 2017, it grew 21%. In 2016, it grew 8%. The first trend I'm noticing is over the past, if we don't count 2019, AMD's revenue is going up pretty strong. Now let's take a look at NVIDIA's. NVIDIA last year, 2019, showed a decrease of 7%. Again, we're doing the same thing for AMD, so let's just take AMD, let's take 2019 out of it. In 2018, NVIDIA grew 20%. In 2017, NVIDIA grew 40%, and in 2016, it grew 38%. So the good thing about an AMD's revenue is if we don't count 2019, it does seem like it is going at an uptrend. The highest of that trend was 23%. Now, if we take a look at NVIDIA, we kind of see there's no real trend. It went up once and then it goes down once, so we can't really see. But NVIDIA's revenue growth is a lot stronger. In the past 4 years, if we don't count 2019, the weakest revenue growth was 20.6%. which is actually closest to the highest revenue growth that AMD saw. So for revenue growth, I am going to have to give it to NVIDIA on this one. All right, so right now, both of them have 2 points. Now we're gonna take a look at margin growth. And after margins growth, we're gonna take a look at this company's cash flow margins. All right, so now let's take a look at their their margins. So AMD will be the first one. Let's take a look at AMD's gross margins. The first thing I wanna say is AMD's gross margins are in an uptrend. In 2016, they were 23.2%. Now in 2019, they were 42.6%. So we are seeing that growth there. The second thing is profit margins are also in an uptrend. Profit margins are 5% in 2019 compared to negative 11% in 2016. So AMD has been increasing its profit margins and gross margins, and the uptrend seems like it's continuing. Now let's take a look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA seems to be more of a stable company compared to AMD. AMD would be more of a place where it's more of a very strong growth sense, but that's actually false now that I think of it, because we saw that very strong revenue growth in NVIDIA as well. Gross margins for NVIDIA were 62.2% for 2019. Profit margins were 25.6%. So this is actually beating AMD in both profit margins and gross margins. So here I am going to have to give another point to NVIDIA based on that. But one thing I do want to mention is the same thing we saw in revenue growth and margin growth for AMD is the one thing that revenue and margins is winning in AMD is both of them are in an uptrend. So they are continuing to go up. So it could be that eventually this company can overtake NVIDIA in a form of revenue growth, or can be in similar, not overtake, right? It can eventually end up at similar levels where NVIDIA's at, right? Eventually that margin growth will stop and it will flatline and it will look more stable like something NVIDIA is showing. All right, so next I want to take a look at free cash flow margins. First, let's start off with AMD. AMD's most recent free cash flow margins was 4.1%. So free cash flow margins is pretty much just whatever the business keeps after everything is done and paid for in the form of operating the business. Free cash flow margins, like I said, was 4.1%. That's usually pretty low, but remember, this is starting to show to be more of a growth-based company. Now, if we take a look at NVIDIA's free cash flow margins is as high as 39.13%. And one thing I am liking about NVIDIA's and not AMD's free cash flow margins is pretty much all over the place, right? There's no real trend that's happening. There might be a small uptrend happening, but it's just not really noticeable. Unlike NVIDIA's, if we take a look at NVIDIA's free cash margins, you can really see that overall trend is trending up. There might be some dips down, but the overall trend is showing positive free cash flow margins. And the almost 40% free cash flow margins is very, very strong. Again, another point here I'm going to have to give to NVIDIA on cash flow margins. All right, so right now NVIDIA has 4 points, AMD has 2 points. AMD, like I said, it's not a bad investment. That's nowhere near what I'm saying. I can honestly see why people are investing in AMD. Me, myself, for example, are one of those persons. AMD is definitely showing a growth incoming compared to NVIDIA. NVIDIA seems to be more of a stable place. Next, if you guys have been watching the video, right, you might notice I switched some of the points. I realized some of my points were actually different, so I fixed it right now. The only things we have left to take a look at is both of the company's balance sheets, valuation based on forward PE and forward price to sales ratio, and finally my thoughts on the business. All right, so balance sheet it is. So now let's take a look at AMD's. Let's start off with AMD's balance sheet. So AMD has non-current debt of about $700 million. It has no current debt in the most recent quarter. This company has about $1.3 billion in cash and about 50 million in current investments. So it has roughly $1.4 billion in quick cash. So this company has more than double the amount of cash to pretty much pay off its total non-current debt. This is a very, very strong balance sheet, to say the least, right? A 2-to-1 ratio here. Now, if we take a look at NVIDIA has a big portion of cash right now, but let me say this cash distribution was before this company actually did the acquisition of Mellanox. Right now, this company shows to have cash of $15.5 billion. I know that has decreased because of the acquisition with Mellanox, but let's just play with these numbers right now. Non-current debt for this company is about $7.5 billion, and it has zero current debt. So both these companies, if paid off in full, have close to a 2-to-1 ratio in distribution in balance sheet, right? So both of them actually have a very strong balance sheet. Just the ratios seem very similar, just the numbers are what's off. So for that reason, I'm actually going to give both points to AMD and NVIDIA here, since both ratios are looking pretty good and both of them have a very, very strong balance sheet. All right, so right now AMD has 3 points, NVIDIA has 5 points. We only have 2 more things to take a look at, and that's just valuation of the company, see which one is cheaper at the moment. So here we're going to take a look at seekingalpha.com and take a look at their forward PE ratios and forward price to sales ratio. So for December of 2021, that's 2 years from now, the forward PE ratio for AMD is about 35. Let me zoom in for you guys right here so you can see this is 35 for AMD. If we take a look at NVIDIA's forward PE ratio is 37.5. So when we take a look at forward PE ratio, AMD is a lot cheaper at the moment. Now, if we take a look at forward price to sales ratio for AMD, it's 6.32 when compared to NVIDIA's 13.29. So at the moment, AMD seems to be a lot cheaper than NVIDIA. So we're gonna give the point to AMD. But why is it cheaper? Let's think about that, right? Let's just not think about just the valuation. Even though we did give a point, let's try to understand why AMD is cheaper than NVIDIA. The first reason I can see is NVIDIA has already profitable margins and it already has a very strong gross margins. So obviously you're going to pay a lot more for a company that's already making money, right? This is a company that's making tons and tons of money when in regards to AMD. The second thing, even though ratio-wise the balance sheet of AMD and NVIDIA were pretty much the same, NVIDIA numerically-wise has a lot more cash to be able to survive during bad times. The other thing, NVIDIA's free cash flow margins is so much higher than AMD's. So obviously, if things are looking better, you're going to pay a better price, right? Why would anyone expect NVIDIA to be cheaper than AMD? Now, if NVIDIA was cheaper than AMD right now, I would be out there buying NVIDIA like crazy right now, because I do believe right now that NVIDIA is in a better state than AMD. Again, I'm not saying AMD is bad. I am both a bull for AMD and NVIDIA. Right now, I'm just a little more bullish on NVIDIA. So like I mentioned, right, the forward price to sales ratio was given to AMD. So AMD has 4 points right now. NVIDIA has 5. Now, the final one is going to be my thoughts, right? And this is just completely my opinion. Here, I honestly want to say I'm going to give a point to both of them. I do think they're both very strong positions, and they're both they're both companies that I feel can continue to grow. AMD and NVIDIA are both in the data center market right now. Data center is going to continue to grow, especially with this working from home continuing. And many companies are continuing that thing even after COVID-19. Even after people are returning to work, a lot of companies have reduced their just workforce in the main office. A lot of people are working from home. So both of them are in the sector. Both of them are also in the esports market sector, and that's something I'm very, very bullish on. I do believe NVIDIA is a little bit more into that sector because of their cloud gaming, something that at the moment isn't really collecting revenue for them, but NVIDIA's cloud gaming is something that I am very, very bullish on. AMD, on the other hand, with their CPUs and being a threat to Intel, can continue to build even more revenue from there. So like I said, and NVIDIA, again, with the artificial intelligence and the auto industry, where AMD is just overall in both CPUs and GPUs, where that can continue to grow over time. I have to say both of these companies are winners in my mind. But not unfortunately, the true winner here is going to be NVIDIA with 6 points, AMD with 5 points. And again, this does not mean that AMD is a bad investment. I just honestly, even right now, I do believe NVIDIA might be a better investment than AMD. But as a shareholder, I'm actually holding both. By looking at this though, it tells me if things go bad for the companies, if market would crash, I am more likely to buy NVIDIA first opposed to AMD. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Like always, make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the thumbs up and the bell. It helps the small channel out so much, and I truly, truly appreciate all the support. Take care, guys, and have a good night.